Yes, thank you. It is so awesome to be here with you guys today. The energy the past 2 days was fantastic, and it's been rivaled only by, and I'm thinking about the Tea Party rallies that I came to Washington, D.C. to participate in, where there were hundreds of thousands of like-minded people. I have so enjoyed being with like-minded people today. So thank you for your energy. Thank you for being here. Thank you for taking time out of your schedule to be with other people today. And thank you for having me. This is so awesome. This is amazing. And by the way, Candace is incredible. I am so proud of her. I am just incredibly proud of her that she stands for something, and she's amazing. She really is. So I am the 57th Lieutenant Governor of the Commonwealth of Kentucky. Thank you. And so if you don't remember anything else I say today, remember this: stand where God needs you to stand. I heard Glenn Beck say that a few times, and so it was. I've had an incredible career. I'm originally from Detroit, Michigan. Anybody here from Detroit? Anybody from Michigan in general? I'm from Detroit. Grew up poor in Detroit, but had an incredible career. I worked my way through engineering school, worked at General Motors for a while, joined the Air Force, served 7 years in the United States Air Force. Yes. And then I worked for 19 years in the corrugated packaging industry, cardboard boxes, right? I know it doesn't sound sexy. It's not e-commerce, but I love manufacturing, so that started on the production floor and rose to plant manager. So a great career there. Whoops, I got to watch the cracks there. A great career, but I'll tell you, in 2012, I felt like I should have been doing something different. And I didn't know what that was. I was active in the Tea Party. Down in Bowling Green, Kentucky, I was the chairman of the Bowling Green Tea Party. So I was getting into the civic activity. I love that movement. We the people, that's what it was about. And so I thought nothing of, calling my elected officials and asking questions about the bills they were working on and the policies they were working on. But you know what? I felt like I should have been doing something other than working in the packaging industry, and I had no clue what that was. And I remembered Glenn Beck's words, stand where God needs you to stand. So one night in 2012, I prayed a prayer, and I said, Lord, please, just show me where it is you need me to stand. And the next morning, my boss called me in his office and told me I was losing my job in 30 days. And I just smiled at him. I really smiled at him, and I thought, wow, this prayer stuff is pretty powerful. But that was only half the equation, right? I took some time off. I did some volunteer work. And when I was ready to go back to work, I did something I never did my entire life. I prayed for guidance, and I got something totally unexpected. Run for office, which I ignored because I thought that was wrong because, I had my own list. But here's the deal. When you ask God for guidance, it's about his plans and not yours. And so in 2014, for the first time, I jumped into the fray and I ran for the Kentucky State House, and I lost. But and I wasn't down about that because I knew it's a 2-year cycle. I could run again. But before I could run again, an upstart guy named Matt Bevin, whom I met through my Tea Party activities, we had vetted candidates, and he was running against Senator McConnell in 2014. And I had vetted him, but he called me up and told me he was jumping into the governor's race and asked me to be his running mate. And after I prayed about it, said yes, and the rest is history. This is the first elected office I've ever held. And I'm telling you that by God's grace, I stand here as the governor, the lieutenant governor of the Commonwealth of Kentucky. It's not by my doing. It's not by my doing at all. And so when I was running for the House, in 2014, when I ran for the House, when you run for office, there are laws. You have to put a disclaimer on everything, paid for by Jenean Hampton Campaign Fund, right? You ever hear those ads where they say it really fast at the end of the ad, or it's on printed materials? So I did that, but there was something else I wanted on every campaign material. a reference to my favorite Bible verse, which is this, Galatians 5:1. Stand fast in the liberty wherewith Christ has made us free, and be not entangled again in the yoke of bondage. There is so much in there to unpack. The yoke of bondage. Bondage can be anything, right? It can be addiction, it can be drugs, it can be any number of things. It can be boxing yourselves in when God says you have gifts. It can be boxing yourselves in and telling yourselves that you can't do it. But the first part of that I love, stand fast. But first, stand. You can distill it down to that. And so I had all my materials had Galatians 5:1 on it. It was on my bumper stickers. It was on my church fans. It was on my yard signs, Galatians 5:1. And that Bible verse today hangs in my office. It just speaks to me. It really does. Freedom and liberty were given to us by God. They're not given to us by man. The Constitution codifies that. And so let me just talk to you about some of the influences on me. Why am I just a warrior for freedom and liberty? And it goes back to growing up in Detroit for me. I was born in 1958, so the first 10 years of my life were the turbulent 1960s. So let me share some of the influences on me. First, my parents. Even though my parents divorced when I was young, they were around, they were there for me. I had a praying mother. To this day, my mom is 92 and lives with me and my husband, and she is amazing. She is amazing. She is absolutely incredible. And she set boundaries for me and my three sisters. And today, my three sisters and I, by the way, we're all first in our family to go to college. All four of us. All four of us. Martin Luther King Jr., I was 10 years old the year he was killed. And I remember him talking about his kids, and you've all heard the quote, right? Where he says, I want my kids to be judged by the content of their character and not the color of their skin. You've all heard that, right? Yes. Well, I remember thinking about this. You know, I was that kid I often would think about things. I would listen to what the adults would say and kind of ponder it. So I was thinking about what he said, and it made a lot of sense. I was aware of the civil rights movement, and so I knew why he said that. But here's the deal. This is how I internalized it. If it meant that not only could I expect not to be judged by the color of my skin, but it meant when I dealt with other people, their skin color couldn't be an issue for me either. And let me tell you what that did for me. It was so freeing. It was so liberating because my role models never had to look like me. They didn't. I could learn from anybody. I could learn from anyone. My mentors didn't have to look like me. I never needed to see a successful black person to know that I could be successful. I never needed to see a successful woman to know that I could be successful. And you know what? Because I was reading a lot, I was an avid reader, sometimes my role models weren't even human. They were aliens, you know? So, you know, you can learn from anyone. And I have carried that with me my entire life, and it has been wonderful, absolutely wonderful. Some other influences on me were the people who bullied me. You know, when Candace was talking about being mocked because she, quote unquote, speaks white, I got that too. I was mocked for getting good grades. I was mocked for reading. I was mocked for the way I spoke. And I didn't get that at all. I was even mocked for the music I listened to. Now, if you're growing up in the 1960s in Detroit, Michigan, you gotta love Motown, okay? Which I did. You gotta, Temptations, Four Tops, all of that. Yes, I was into that, but I was into music in general. It didn't matter. It was British rock. It was classical. It was a lot of things. And I had these kids who were my peers, other black kids, they would mock me for my choices. And I remember at one point, when I was about 11 or 12, just wondering, I never did anything to these kids. I wasn't looking for trouble. I was a skinny, nerdy, geeky kid, and I embraced my nerdiness, okay? So don't nobody be offended. I was a proud nerd, but I was, yes. But I was trying to avoid trouble, so I wasn't looking for trouble. But these kids were mocking me, and I just remember at one point, I just was so frustrated. I remember thinking, well, at what point in my life do I get to just be Jenean, where I don't have to explain my choices to anybody? And you know what? I had the answer. The answer was right then. Because here's the deal, we had studied the Constitution, and I knew that I had the right to chart my own course. I did. And I didn't have to listen to these people who were telling me, it was peer pressure to fail is what it is. And I just put a shield up like on Star Trek, shields up. Shields up, I don't have to deal with that. I just really don't. So I knew I was blessed to live in the greatest nation on earth at this time. I knew that. And I knew there was opportunity, and I knew it was largely up to me as to what I did with this. School, I love school. This is another huge influence. And in the 1960s in Detroit, they decided to teach Black American history, a deep dive into Black American history. It was awesome. It was incredible. We learned about some fantastic people, but we also did a deep dive into the slave trade too. And I can remember I was stunned to learn that it was once illegal to teach Black people to read and write. I mean, the whole thing was just heartbreaking. When you see that diagram, that pack diagram, like they're sardines, and then when you really realize, they're laying down and they can't move, and when you realize that particular level, they can't even sit up, it was heartbreaking. But here's what I took away. Here's my takeaway. I'm always looking for the takeaway, right? Knowing that at one time, our families, Black families, were split up and sold, I resolved that if I ever had a family, I was going to take care of them. Knowing that at one time it was illegal to teach Black people to read and write, there was no way I was dropping out of school. There was no way that was going to happen. And I also knew that I had a freedom. Even in the 1960s, I had a freedom that our ancestors, that slaves prayed to have. I was not going to squander it. I was not going to squander it at all. And so, today I hear talk of reparations. You hear I'm surprised they're talking. I've heard this throughout history. They're talking about reparations, and I've heard people talk about slavery as though it's embedded in my cellular memory. I mean, I was born in 1958. I don't know anybody who was a slave. But let me tell you who is in my DNA, so to speak. Not related to them, but I'll tell you who I carry in my DNA. It's people like George Washington Carver, engineer. It's people like Phyllis Wheatley, she was a slave, but she was a poet. It's people like Frederick Douglass, activist. It's people like Harriet Tubman, badass. Yeah, that's who's in my DNA. That's who I learned from. So let me tell you about some of the bias. This is some of the things I've heard. I've heard when you Republicans, when you get successful, you don't come back and remember the people who are struggling. And I had a Black pastor tell me that. He was pointing at me, right? You people don't, right? And I told him, well, would that be those of us who tried to come back and tell you something, and you called us sellout? You called us coons. You called us tokens. There are some of us who've tried to come back and help, and you pushed us away. And I just wish the Black community would stop doing that. I might know a thing or two, okay? I do. When Matt Bevin and I filed for office, and we were underdogs. You have to understand how much of an underdog we were. We filed for office, and soon after we filed, the press swarmed us, right? And so first they interview Matt, and they ask him all about, his policies and what he's going to do and why he got in. And finally, after they're done with him, they turn to me, and they didn't ask me about my considerable experience. They didn't ask me about my time in the military and what I brought to the table and what I hope to accomplish. They said this. They said, do you know if you win this election, you'll be the first Black person to hold statewide office in the Commonwealth of Kentucky? Now, I find that interesting, but I brought all this other stuff to the table. I love my state, but they didn't ask me. It's the bias that's inherent, and they don't even realize. They probably meant well, but I am the first Black person elected to statewide office in the Commonwealth of Kentucky. And so, I'm in the history books, but even if I wasn't black, I'd be in the history books either. I'm the 57th lieutenant governor. It's a small club, right? So I'm already in the history books. I ran into a reporter from Detroit when I was lieutenant governor. He was down covering the eclipse, and he asked me this when I told him I was the first black person elected to statewide office. He said, "Well, do you think Kentucky just voted just to make history?" And I said, "The state that rejected Obama twice and Mrs. Clinton in 2016, no, we don't vote to make history. No, I would like to believe they voted for us for other reasons." I also hear this a lot. "Well, you made it because you're lucky. You made it because you're exceptional." And do you understand the bias when they say things like that? It implies that black people as a whole are not, and that you have to be exceptional to make it. It's really, really offensive. It is. But they mean well, they just don't recognize it. So, I became aware of media bias in it was 1980 when Ronald Reagan ran for office. I was living in Detroit, and I thought I was a Democrat then, but I'm pretty conservative, actually. My values have always been conservative. But I didn't like Ronald Reagan when he initially ran because I was listening to the media. They dismissed this man as a cowboy actor, right? And I knew him from his films. I'd watched his old movies. And they totally dismissed the fact that he was a successful two-term governor of California, right? But when he was elected, I gave him a shot, as I do with everybody, and I listened to what he said and what he did. And when he spoke about America being a shining city on the hill, I thought, that's how I feel about America. When he talked about freedom and liberty, I thought, well, that's exactly how I feel. Why am I fighting this guy? And that's when I truly recognized that I'm a conservative, and I have conservative values, and I do not apologize for that. So did y'all enjoy going to the White House yesterday? Was that incredible? Was that not incredible? I have watched politics for over 40 years now because I was actually paying attention in my teens. I have never seen a president treated as poorly as President Trump. From the day he was elected, the drumbeat has been constant. It's been something every single day, and I don't know how he does it. So the young lady who prayed for him yesterday, God bless you. Keep President Trump in your prayers and make the case for him. Make the case for him because he's doing a wonderful job. He really is. I've been often the only person swimming upstream when everybody else is going the other way. Until I got married, I was the lone conservative in my family. But, I believe in my values. I know where my values can lead. I believe in freedom and liberty and small government, lower taxes, hard work. I believe in those things. I do. When I had the honor of meeting Senator Cruz's dad. If you all met Rafael Cruz or heard his story, I heard him tell his story long before I was running for anything. He talked about Cuba. He talked about living under the thumb in Castro's Cuba, socialism, right? And, at the time I was the Tea Party chair, so when I met him, I had a chance to meet him, and I was wearing my Oxford shirt, tastefully embroidered with the Tea Party logo right here, our Tea Party logo. And he knew the flack that we were taking as Tea Party people. He knew that. And so at the end of our discussion, he took my hands in his, and he said, "You just keep fighting. Keep fighting." And when I met Senator Cruz a few years later as lieutenant governor, I told him that story, and I said, "Tell your dad that I fought, I continued to fight, I still do, but you tell your dad that I'm now the lieutenant governor of the Commonwealth of Kentucky. You tell him that." And so I just want to leave you all with this. Keep fighting. Because America is worth it. Your values are solid, and it's your values that will build this great nation. And above all, stand where God needs you to stand. And if you don't know where that is, you just pray, because he'll tell you. And be ready for the answer. Listen for the answer and be ready for something totally unexpected. Because if it was up to me, I would be programming. I would be back to programming. I'd be programming apps or something. And I'd have to explain that at the pearly gates in the afterlife. But stand where God needs you to stand. And ask him, okay? But stay in the fight, because it is so worth it. I am so proud of all of you. Every single one of you. Every single one of you. So I think I have about 5 minutes for questions. So if anybody has any questions, I would love to answer them.
Hello, my name is Grace Chris, and I'm from California, and I'm an older person. I love to observe all these young people. It makes me cry sometimes to see so many young black people and so many young people anyway support our president. But you've got Mitch McConnell in the Senate. And although he's putting a lot of judges, in prominent positions, I think his support for the president is abysmal. I mean, I just think that he, for whatever reason, does not really support our president. And what do you think about that? I mean, because when this impeachment came out and all that, it took him days to say something. And then when he did, he says, well, I'm going to carry it out, blah, 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 blah. So he's from your home state in Kentucky. Does he need to be primaried?
He's up for re-election next year.
That's what I'm talking about. Does he need to be primaried and let a younger person, I'm an older person. All I do is observe and, give my opinion, but I'm not in charge of anything. But looking at him, and from day one, he's been like Paul Ryan, lukewarm, and when it suits him, he supports. When it doesn't suit him, he doesn't support. And President Trump, I love President Trump.
And so
I feel God called him.
So I'll just say this. I don't understand the power he holds in our state. And I'll just say that...
Thank you.
He will probably be primaried. I'll just say that, okay? Somebody else is already in that race. But he doesn't like me either, so because he can't control me. So there you go. Let me go over here.
Hey, I'm Noah from South Carolina.
Hi.
Noah Swader. You're a fantastic speaker, Lieutenant Governor Hampton.
Thank you.
And because you're so inspiring, my question is, have you ever thought about writing a book?
You know what? I am planning on writing a book because I have to get my faith journey on paper. I was 53 when I gave my life to Christ. I had, yes. But my mom took us to church. My mom took us to church every Sunday, sometimes twice a day on Sunday. But I had pushed God to the side after one day I overheard some adults mocking me and my family for how we were dressed. We probably have one good dress that we wore every Sunday. And so I decided, I remember as a kid, if that's what God's about, I'm just not even going to listen. So, but he worked on me. I'm going to tell you, God worked on me because everywhere I was, he put in my path examples of great Christians. That was in college. It was in the Air Force. It was in the box industry. I had an operator who would sit and talk with me. Wonderful people, and he was working on my heart, and he finally got me at the age of 53. And so don't wait till you're 53, guys. As the pastor would say, we are not promised tomorrow. We are not. But I have to get my faith journey on paper because when I look at in hindsight, God was there even though I didn't acknowledge him. He was there the whole time. He was. Now, yes, I will get that on paper. Absolutely. Thank you. And thank you. You know what? I want to point something out. I was not a speaker. When I was the skinny, geeky kid, I wasn't the popular kid. I wasn't athletic. None of that, and I certainly didn't like speaking in front of people. So to be here now with just a bullet points on a page and speak to you all without sweaty palms, I might be having hot flashes, but no sweaty palms. No sweaty palms. The Lord will take you outside of your comfort zone, and you are capable of doing it. You absolutely are. So thank you for that question.
This will be the last question.
Let me go over here.
So the last two speakers, my name is Malika Koji. I'm from Rhode Island.
but I currently live in Dallas, Texas. The last two speakers mentioned having mentors, and you actually mentioned having mentors as well. I have mentors. I have economic mentors. I have spiritual mentors. I have mentors that are just strong men that I look up to. Unfortunately, 21, young men, young people, just people in general, don't understand the importance of having someone to look up to in different areas of life. And earlier you mentioned, I follow people that aren't even black, right? You don't have to look like the person in order to be successful like the person. You just want to have really what the life they have, and they can teach you how to have it if they have it, really. So what would you say to young people wanting to go forward in life, but just not really having much guidance as far as the importance of having people to follow after?
I would say network. It sounds like an overused word, but maybe you don't even have to do it that formally. I had mentors. I had a fantastic mentor in the box industry, the lady who ran the first factory that I worked at. And she took me under her wing and just nurtured me and let me sit in on meetings that most people didn't get to sit in on. She recognized my potential, first of all, because I took an interest in that plant and was helping other departments, even though it wasn't my job to do that. I was doing that. And so she ended up just being an informal mentor, but that's what she was when I look in hindsight. But look for people around you. First of all, surround yourselves with people who lift you up. Right? You don't need to be listening to the people telling you what you're doing wrong, and unless it's constructive criticism. But the people, those peers I had, the peer pressure to fail, I just toned them out. That's just noise. Right. That's just all noise. But find people, and when you find successful people and you ask them for advice, they typically want to tell you.
Absolutely.
If somebody wants to run for office, and please, guys, please, somebody in this room, run for office. I am encouraging you. Jump in there. Jump in. You may not know what you're doing. You may think you don't have any resources, because that's what I said to God when he had me run for the Kentucky House. But you know what? I did way better than people thought I would. And there was a class. I found a candidate class. I found people who have answers, because we don't know all the answers, nor should we be expected to have all the answers. But somebody does. Find those people. Find those people. Just talk to people. It's okay. Is there another question over here? Another question?
I just wanted to tell you I'm running for Congress, and you inspire me, and I think.
God bless you. God bless you. Yes. Absolutely. And I wish you all the best. I wish all of you, I pray that your journey will be as blessed as mine has been. And again, just stand where he needs you, and we're going to be fine. We will be absolutely fine. God bless you all. Thank you.